Josh Brown, your dream is coming true.
What, Love Island the game's happening, is
Sadly,
it?
not. Nor is it Playboy the Mansion Part 2. It is The Last of Us Part 2's remake on PlayStation 5.
Yes! I'm so excited for this.
This is something that lines up with an insider from last year, Tom Henderson over on Insider Gaming, saying there was a director's cut in motion for The Last of Us Part 2, assumedly some sort of PS5 version in the works or whatever, now being leaked by Gustavo Santaolalla over on a Spanish podcast, or Spanish channel on YouTube called Blender, where he's talking about The Last of Us 2, and he mentions a new version of the game where people can come up to him and request different songs, make Santaolalla play various different themes in the game. Obviously, that's not a thing that's in the regular Last of Us 2.
It should be.
And it should be. And he very quickly then says he can't talk about anything else. The cat is then out of the bag.
It absolutely is. Scott, obviously, I'm absolutely buzzing about this as the world's biggest Last of Us Part 2 fan who thought they would have already had a version of The Last of Us Part 2 out, a PS5 version of The Last of Us Part 2 out by now. This is music to my ear holes, and I do have my theories as to why they might have held off, but What is your reaction? Because I know you're probably not as hyped as I am for this.
No, I'm sort of, I don't know, I'm the dude who's just sort of like, oh, can you not just do something with a bit of colour? Can you not do something with a bit of more positivity than just more Last of Us stuff? I don't know if the average person is as wiped out on The Last of Us as me, probably not, but at the same time, I would welcome, at least on a performance technical level, some sort of spruced up version of this, and I'm loving, if it is a director's cut, I've been loving the way that Sony have been doing those so far. Death Stranding's was brilliant, Ghost of Tsushima's was brilliant, and obviously there's the price tag conversation to be had. How much do you then charge for what is ostensibly the same game with, glorified DLC bolted onto it? Not to discount the fact that the stuff that was added to Tsushima or Death Stranding was fun enough, but I wonder, with the popularity of The Last of Us, what do you add to that game? Is it just little features like being able to request songs in the opening part of the game, or do they do something more story-based? Is that why it's taken so long?
That is interesting. I hadn't thought about that, because we've heard so much about The Last of Us Part 3. Is it going to happen next, or will Naughty Dog make a new IP first? Will they bridge the gap? I wonder, with the popularity of The Last of Us as a brand right now, thanks to the HBO TV show dropping earlier on in this year, I hadn't thought about the possibility of them making a kind of Lost Legacy style bridge between the proper sequels to kind of satiate fans and maybe flex with the tech a little bit. I don't necessarily think that would happen, but it would go a long way to explain why it has been so long since the game launched and the PS5 dropped and this project releasing.
There's also the fact that Naughty Dog, at the minute, they have longtime president Evan Wells is retiring soon, or he's stepping down soon, and Neil Druckmann's going to be taking over overall, which is awesome. We absolutely love Druckmann. Dude's a massively influential person when it comes to video games overall. But I wonder if this was something that, he's very happy to sort of greenlight, the idea that Last of Us is kind of him and Bruce Straley's baby, and you might as well do more with it in a story-based context. And do something that's more short form that adds to The Last of Us 2 while you wait for the TV show to catch up, for that stuff to be done. Because, like you just said, Last of Us is a brand now. It is this massive thing, which is, there's a whole other conversation to be had about maybe it could have just stayed as a one-off. But I don't want to be that guy, at least right now.
Looking at it objectively, I think it makes sense for them to save this project until The Last of Us Season 2 drops. Obviously, that season will be covering at least partially the events of the second game. And if you look at how much The Last of Us Season 1 boosted sales of The Last of Us Part 1, it was absolutely crazy. Everyone was watching that show and people were going to that game and buying it en masse. Like, it was insane, the sales spike that game got. So I imagine if I was Sony, I'd be looking at that graph going all the way up during that season and thinking, how can we do this again? And to me, the easiest way to do that is to get a remastered version of The Last of Us Part 2 out. I would prefer that rather than a remake or I would prefer the director's cut approach, is what I'm trying to say.
I'm just thinking, because it's one of those things where you think about the original Last of Us 10 years ago at this point. And we did get Left Behind, which I absolutely loved as an additional thing. And it felt more essential, I guess, if you want to talk about the, Riley and Ellie's relationship and everything, and fleshing that out and doing so in a way that felt really purposeful. But even gameplay-wise, you had things in that DLC that weren't really in the main game, like pitting the humans against the infected and everything and bringing them together. There was a little bit of a wrinkle to gameplay that wasn't really there in the main story that much. And I wonder if they do something like that. What would you do as an additional story bit? Is there a bit that's missing that you could plug in?
I don't think there necessarily is. You can maybe flesh out some of the flashbacks between Ellie and Joel if you wanted to. You can maybe add a little addendum to the post game, either catching up with Ellie, though I think they'll keep that ambiguous to part 3, or finally confirm what happened to Lev and Abby, because obviously that's heavily hinted at by the final screen of the game, trying to avoid vague spoilers here. But that is a story that could theoretically, if it's not going to be addressed in a part 3, be fully concluded and fully wrapped up in a sort of epilogue piece of DLC. Whether they'll do that, I'm not sure. I would like to see that. To me, honestly, though, I think the director's cut will be more likely timed with the release of Season 2, like I said.
Right.
But The Last of Us factions, I wonder whether they have a little bit of a crossover where they finally drop the multiplayer Last of Us game that they've been working on, at the same time as they drop a director's cut and say, look, if you get the director's cut of The Last of Us Part 2, you also get these skins or these boosters or whatever for the Last of Us factions. I don't think that's out the realm of possibility either.
No, I feel like you saying The Last of Us brand has crystallized my thoughts on why it gives me the ick, which is just that general, I don't even know what that term means. I keep seeing it, but it's definitely that thing where I'm just sort of like, oh, don't stretch it too thin. Don't over milk this thing. Like I said, the two comparisons that we have in regards to Sony's push for director's cuts, as far as I know, are Death Stranding and Ghost of Tsushima. I don't think they've done anything other than that just yet.
I don't think so.
But that feels like a nice way to sort of reapproach various games, add little bits and pieces on. Death Stranding, it was just Kojima sort of flexing his Metal Gear muscles again and doing sort of like quasi cardboard box Metal Gear stealth stuff.
Yes.
And then Ghost of Tsushima was just, here's some stuff about Jin Sakai's dad.
They added in a racetrack as well.
They did add a racetrack in as well, and a little drone that walks around with your packages and everything. But so far, those director's cuts have been like, they're worthwhile additions, but for me, they don't justify the full price. So I think it's one of those things where they might as well do a PlayStation 5 version of this. And also, if you talk about performance and resolution and everything, we were looking this up before we came in. The Last of Us 2 does hit 60 FPS on PS4 Pro and PlayStation 5. It doesn't have a 4K mode alongside that. It has 1440p. So there is a bit more to go for if you want to do some sort of native 4K version of it that just looks even more beautiful.
Absolutely. I think, the version of The Last of Us Part 2 that you can play on the PlayStation 5 now, as I did again last year, it runs very well. The 60 frames per second is solid. It kind of transforms the gameplay in a way and makes it tighter. But, I would like to see what overhaul textures would look like, because even though there's not a huge difference between The Last of Us Part 2 and The Last of Us Part 1, that being the remake, like some of The Last of Us Part 1 animations and facial tech is just unbelievable alongside the lighting and stuff. So they could push it. It's just whether or not we want a proper full-on remaster in the vein of The Last of Us Remastered or the upcoming Horizon Zero Dawn remaster/remake from Guerrilla Games. Like Sony are all in on doing this stuff right now.
Yeah, there's a whole thing doing the rounds at the minute with Sony where they've invested like $2.1 billion into R&D towards first-party stuff. Most of that is towards live service games, but single-player stuff is mentioned as well. But like it is interesting thinking about just how much they're reinvesting in their first-party IP and their first-party characters and everything else, because that did come into the fore across the PlayStation 4 generation, where they sort of remembered they have all these big IPs and then started bolstering them a lot more. And The Last of Us, like you just said, we had the original release, we had the remaster on PlayStation 4, then we had the PlayStation 5 version of it, and then we had The Last of Us 2, and then there was the patch for The Last of Us 2 that was on PS5, and then now there's the actual Last of Us 2 version that is also on PlayStation 5.
Why do you think it's taken so long? Because the games you mentioned there, like Ghost of Tsushima obviously came out in the same year as The Last of Us Part 2. It came out after The Last of Us Part 2, and that's got a director's cut. Death Stranding, obviously the year before, at the end of 2019, that's got a director's cut. It's always felt like a bigger mission. Maybe it's just because there was too much Last of Us too fast. Like you said, we had the sequel, then we had the patch, and then we had the TV show, and then we had Part 1. There's already been a lot of drops along there, and I'm sure they probably thought Factions would have been out by now from considering how long ago they announced that thing. So yeah, I kind of wonder whether this is something they've just been holding on to for a while, trying to find the right place to drop it.
Yeah, well, Naughty Dog are like I have to imagine, because over the years they've always had like full creative control. You have someone like I mentioned, Druckmann is taking an increasingly important role in the studio, and they always seem to be the studio that can push back against the more corporate whims of a modern day Sony. They can sort of say like, no, we need time to do this thing right, and if maybe they've been asked, maybe the mandate was, look, this is what a Sony director's cut is, you need to think of something to add on to this,
right?
And they need more time, and they're able to have those conversations because Last of Us is so lucrative, and Neil Druckmann was involved so much in The Last Last of Us HBO show. So maybe it just takes more time to decide what that addendum's going to be.
The addendum should be The Last of Us HBO skins that come over. You should be able to play the entire first game and second game somehow as Pedro Pascal and
like
Bella
voice
Ramsey.
packs
Would
and-
barely work, but if they do time it around season 2, obviously you'll have the updated actors' costumes and whatnot. So it could work. It's
I'll tell you what,
a synergistic piece of content.
I will pay the money for a Nick Offerman skin.
Yeah,
if you drop
yeah.
him in there, I'll probably take it. But yeah, check this video out right here for more Last of Us stuff. Let us know what you think down in the comments below. The Last of Us 2 director's cut. He's killing himself. What's up?
I've just realised that when they do finally drop factions, they're going to have the HBO versions as skins. You're going to be able to play as Nick Offerman's Bill in that.
It's about
world,
time.
aren't they?
Yeah, probably.
Kinda
Also,
dig
this
that.
video right here. Why not?
Go watch it.
See
please.
you soon.
Thank you. Bye bye.